ICE is the one that is doing what they're required to do. These politicians are at least encouraging or tacitly encouraging violence because that's in their political interest. It's so shameful, and I am, very worried that we're going to have something horrible happen that could be preventable. But yeah, they need to catch this person, lock them up, throw away the keys, because this cannot happen any longer.
So it seems clear to me that although it hasn't been the biggest national news story as of late, the violence and terrorism against our ICE agents in the streets is going absolutely nowhere, and neither is the insane Democrat rhetoric and policy towards it. There's a reason I've been saying for months that the Democrat Party as an institution is absolutely condoning and even sponsoring the political violence that we're seeing in the streets. And some people respond by saying, oh, but the politicians tell people to be peaceful. It's like, okay. But when they respond to a video of an obvious riot and non-peaceful people by saying that they were peaceful, then what exactly even is the definition of that? When they refuse to condemn political violence, or like JB Pritzker and many others, even deny that it happened as ICE agents are having guns pulled on them and getting shot at, then no, they do not effing condemn political violence. As a matter of fact, when they cheer these very protesters as heroes, they know exactly what they're doing. By the way, when they continue to spread constant hoaxes and lies about what ICE agents are doing out in the streets, and as they get fact-checked, they refuse to do anything, they refuse to retract their statements or apologize. What is that the process of? That is called stochastic terrorism. They intentionally know the reaction that their insane, mentally ill voter base is going to get as a result of it, and they're absolutely cheering all of this on, and we're seeing another example of that today. As a Democrat voter and a top supporter, aka an illegal alien Latin American gangbanger in the city of Chicago, over the weekend, apparently attempted to do a drive-by shooting on ICE and Border Patrol agents. Guess what the context of that was? While, of course, these insane Democrat supporters, who inevitably would be cheered on by Brandon Johnson, JB Pritzker, and all of the Democrats, were basically inciting a riot outside of a Border Patrol operation. So I want to bring you this story. I want to show you, by the way, the total failure by Chicago PD to actually bring this guy in. That's another point I've been making. Hey, if you condemn the violence, then why don't your police arrest people who are committing violence? Portland, Chicago, Los Angeles, many other cases. Well, that's of course because they don't. So we'll bring you this full chronicle, and I also want to show you again what some Democrats are saying about it, the hoaxes that they're spreading, and a lot more. And this is important, right? We need to be clear that they're continuing to do the same garbage. And by the way, it ought to be a pretty necessary conversation to have to the people who say Trump needs to stop the ICE raids. Oh, really? Why? Why? Oh, because it's hurting us politically. Oh, you mean because people are lying about them? Or you mean because it's riling up the political left voter base to commit violence? Like, what kind of argument is that? No, these are only cases to do more and more ICE raids and ramp them up, but we'll talk about that as well. So let's get into it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so on Saturday, as I'm sure many of you were paying attention to other things, this was apparently the scene at a Border Patrol operation in Chicago. Midway Blitz is still going on, and of course the Democrat voters, driven on and egged on by their politicians, created this scene of chaos outside. And then you could probably expect what happens next, because obviously when you put a certain cohort of Democrat voters in any one area, right, just enough numbers of them, violence is going to break out, because, there's always going to be a deviation to the norm. Let us say that, from the people who elect Jay Jones, celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk, celebrate murders and assassination attempts against ICE agents. What else do we expect, from the lovely party of peace? All right, check it out. Right, so there you see a bunch of Antifa and Trantifa doing their normal garbage, blocking roads, making a bunch of noise. By the way, in a residential neighborhood, those poor people. And then, of course, in their alliance with the Latin American cartels and gangs, which, by the way, we've covered on this channel. I forget which video it is, but feel free to go try to find it, right? About how actually far left Antifa groups were like traveling to Mexico and like, cooperating with one another to put the bounties from the cartels on the Border Patrol agents' heads. So, that is basically the unholy trinity of the Democrat Party. You have the Democrat Party, the radical violent communists, and the Latin American cartels. And they're all working together, right? What an amazing political coalition you have. And that's why Jay Jones obviously gets elected in a place like Virginia. But that said, as you could expect, okay, here's what happens next with the peaceful protest.
Breaking news out of Chicago. Customs and Border Protection says agents were shot at while conducting an immigration enforcement operation earlier today. It comes amid weeks of rising tensions between protesters and federal authorities over the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration. Christina Coleman is covering this developing story for us. Christina.
Hi, John. Right now, authorities are searching for whoever fired shots at federal agents conducting immigration enforcement today in Chicago. The shooting is another brazen act of violence against federal authorities carrying out the president's crackdown on illegal immigration. DHS says Border Patrol was conducting immigration enforcement operations near 26th Street and Kedzie Avenue in Chicago when an unknown male suspect driving a black Jeep fired shots at agents and fled the scene. They say some agitators also threw a paint can and bricks at Border Patrol's vehicles. So disturbing. Chicago police were called in for assistance and cleared the scene. Authorities referred to this as a dynamic situation. DHS released a statement following the violence saying, quote, "This incident is not isolated and reflects a growing and dangerous trend of violence and obstruction. Over the past 2 months, we've seen an increase in assaults and obstruction targeting federal law enforcement during operations. These confrontations highlight the dangers our agents face daily and the escalating aggression toward law enforcement. The violence must end." And again, authorities are still searching for the shooter in this case. We'll continue to track this and report on any developments. Again, they're still searching for the shooter and the vehicle. They both remain at large, John.
Yeah, Christina, thank you.
Yeah, so I'd like to pretend to be surprised, but obviously we all know that this is just normal left-wing behavior. Right? I mean, I think the conservatives in America made a very simple plea after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. 4 words: please stop killing us. And of course, the moderate and reasonable Democrat Party, so pro-democracy. We want to have a bright future with loving the flowers and all this stuff. And we just want to give you health care, all that crap, right? Of course, responded by celebrating his assassination, calling for more of it, actively committing more political violence out in the streets, and of course, how could we forget electing Jay Jones, the guy who fantasizes about murdering the children of Republicans? That's what we're dealing with, obviously, in this country. And you may be asking the question here, by the way, as to why a manhunt was necessary. I mean, it would seem to me, a Border Patrol operation, this guy drives by, it is a drive-by shooting. Shouldn't there be law enforcement around who could catch the guy in that very moment? Well, that's of course not the case because guess what? Thanks to their sanctuary city law, Chicago PD will not show up if at all. But when they do show up, as you heard there, only after a shooting takes place, only after there's violence, when of course we know that violence happens all the freaking time because we're dealing with the left-wing coalition here, right? And the dystopian aspect of it all is, what has JB Pritzker said for months? We don't need National Guard. Trump's an authoritarian. But I condemn political violence, right? He says he condemns political violence, but he refuses to allow Trump to send a National Guard or increase security when Border Patrol, not even the first time, by the way, is getting shot at in his freaking streets. So as I said again, right? People think I'm crazy for saying, no, the Democrat politicians support this violence. What is the logical conclusion? I'm going to pose it again. What is the logical conclusion supposed to be when there's already violence happening in the streets and you refuse to use your own police to actually help the Border Patrol preemptively, but simultaneously strike down and will sue over any attempt by the federal government and Trump to send a National Guard to protect those Border Patrol agents, right? You won't protect them, and you refuse to let anyone else protect them while you know there's already violence. The only logical conclusion of that is JB Pritzker, of course, supports the terrorism. That's all that it is. These Democrat politicians, as you can tell by the way their supporters act, actually want these ICE agents to be killed and shot at, and that is, of course, the story. Now, that said, just today, that suspect has been apprehended. They found the shooter, and, well, let me just say, I don't think you're exactly going to be surprised with who he was.
A breaking update right now. To a story that we've been reporting all afternoon, a suspect is now in custody in connection with Saturday's shooting targeting Border Patrol agents in this mess in Chicago. DHS says he is a criminal illegal alien from Mexico with a prior felony. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin joins us live from Chicago with the breaking news on this. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Martha, that is the breaking development that Border Patrol agents, or federal agents, I should say, now have a suspect in custody for firing at Border Patrol agents on Saturday. The video we have is after the shots were fired. People mobbed to the scene. Chicago police showed up to control the scene. But DHS says Saturday morning, Border Patrol agents were operating in the predominantly Hispanic Little Village neighborhood when a man drove up in a Jeep, opened fire, and drove away. No one was shot, but investigators collected shell casings and video from the scene. There was a joint investigation of the FBI, ATF, and Chicago police. That suspect is from Mexico and, again, in custody.
They've got a suspect in custody, an illegal alien that has a past conviction for firearms, a past felony conviction for firearms. This suspect's in custody, and they're pursuing leads based on this suspect. It appears he was in the Jeep, and he was armed.
Oh, so you mean to tell me he was the normal Democrat constituent? Huh. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, he was an illegal alien, check. Latin American gangster, very likely, check. Violent, check. Tried to kill Border Patrol agents and get celebrated by the left for it, check. Yeah. Talk about the very average person that, you know, the Democrat Party constantly protests on behalf of. ICE will arrest someone like this on a basically daily basis, and then the people will show up in protests. Democrat politician will quote tweet it and says, "This is so horrible what ICE is doing to our communities." And of course they tell us, right? These are the immigrant communities. These are the best of us. You know, they're just as American as you or I, right? These are the people that Democrats constantly sit here and fight for to stay in the United States of America. And after an incident like this, I don't think it's exactly a big mystery as to why, right? Why do you think Democrats fight so hard for this person or people like this, right? Because what do they later go on to do? Oh, they're like, again, violent gangsters who manage to have a shared interest with the Democrat Party because they're both against ICE and Border Patrol. Oh, let me just go out and basically commit a terrorist attack as an illegal alien. And then there you go. And of course, right, the JB Pritzker, the Democrats of the local leadership, they don't have to respond. They won't say anything. They'll just deny that it even happened. And again, I say this is far from the first case of this happening in recent memory, even in Chicago. Forget nationwide. Recent memory. Just before Halloween, for instance, we have another case on October 23rd where Border Patrol agents conducted enforcement operations near 27th and Whipple Avenue. A large crowd of 75 to 100 rioters surrounded law enforcement who set up a perimeter after agents were boxed in by a large box truck. Right? They literally are ambushing ICE agents. And by the way, as we've been talking about, this is a fairly normal thing that they do in Chicago. And JB Pritzker calls this peaceful protest. He supports this garbage, right? That's peaceful, according to them. Peaceful protest is good. You know, the people are rightly mad because ICE is deporting Latin American gangbangers. And then that's what happened. And then rioters then shot at the agents with commercial artillery shell fireworks. Again, normal left-wing peaceful protest, normal behavior of left-wing voters. Very, very common, right? A Border Patrol transport van carrying illegal aliens attempting to get to the safety of the perimeter was then attacked. Border Patrol agents were able to secure the van and get it to the perimeter. The mob of rioters grew more hostile and violent, advancing towards ICE agents, and then began throwing rocks, which, by the way, throwing rocks are deadly weapons, and other objects at agents, including one that struck Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino in the head. But of course, they're the bad guys, right? And then, of course, one day after ICE and Border Patrol get shot at, what rhetoric do we get from, for instance, Democrat Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal? She says being undocumented is not a crime, which it obviously is. But this is what they do. They spread lies. And why do they spread lies? Again, for the purpose of stochastic terrorism. Don't believe me? I don't think it's any coincidence that this happens at the end of the week after you might have noticed they spread a number of hoaxes about what ICE was doing on the internet, right? You might remember that you had the guy who had the seizure and they said ICE is attacking a guy with a seizure. Except he wasn't having a seizure. They gave him a medical examination. It was completely fake. Or remember the girl who was running from ICE She ran into a daycare center and hid in there, and then ICE went into the daycare center, and then the Democrat politician said, ICE raided a daycare center, this is so evil, and never retracted it when they got fact-checked, right? You see this happening time and time again.
Hi, I'm Lauren Viss, Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security, and I'm here to set the record straight on a few fake news stories from this week. First, we have the LA Times reporting that our law enforcement officers arrested a father and drove off with his baby. Let me tell you what is missing from this headline. While Border Patrol conducted a targeted immigration enforcement operation, a U.S. citizen exited his vehicle wielding a hammer and threw rocks at law enforcement while he had a child in his car. He was arrested for assault, and during his arrest, a pistol, which was stolen out of the state of New York, was found in his car. The individual also has an active warrant for property damage. Next on the list, we have a fake news story almost all major outlets in local Chicago media ran with, that ICE raided a daycare to arrest a preschool teacher. ICE law enforcement did not target a daycare. Officers attempted to conduct a targeted traffic stop of this female illegal alien from Colombia. Officers attempted to pull over this vehicle, which was registered to a female illegal alien with sirens and emergency lights. But the male driver refused to pull the vehicle over. Law enforcement pursued the vehicle before the illegal alien sped into a shopping plaza where he and the female passenger fled the vehicle. They ran into a daycare and attempted to barricade themselves inside, recklessly endangering the children inside. The illegal alien female was arrested inside a vestibule, not in the daycare. Let me be clear. ICE is not targeting daycares or schools. Finally, we have a viral video circulating online claiming ICE is quote-unquote beating up people. Here are the facts conveniently left out. Our officer was assaulted by this violent rioter. During an operation, law enforcement was aggressively tailgated by a vehicle. As agents tried to make a U-turn, the red car crashed into Border Patrol. A hostile crowd then surrounded agents and their vehicles and began verbally abusing and spitting on them. One physically assaulted a Border Patrol agent and even kicked an agent. As he was being arrested, he grabbed the agent's genitals and squeezed them. The officer defended himself to free himself from the agitator's grasp. Our officers are facing a 1,000% increase in assaults, an 8,000% increase in death threats against them, as they put their lives on the line every single day to arrest criminal illegal aliens, including murderers, rapists, abusers, and gang members.
Well, gee, I wonder why that is. I wonder why ICE could be facing more targeted violence towards them. Could it have anything to do with the fact that the media en masse is just promoting lies and hoaxes about them? Time and time again, right? Hey, in Chicago, after all. You know, the big story in the local area that week was ICE raided the daycare. Again, not true. And then what happens that weekend, right? People get angry. By the way, that shooter in the streets was not the only one, right? They also talked about people were throwing paint cans and other things, rocks, all this stuff, right? Well, when you keep on lying and spreading these lies and obviously getting a bunch of people to believe them, what do you think is going to happen next? And ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. Do you think the media doesn't know? Right? Do you think these journalists, quote unquote, and the Democrat propagandists, they probably know there's more to the story, right? But the point is they don't care. They know the reaction that it will incite from their voters, and that is exactly what it is all about. And the same is true, by the way, with their policing policy, where they won't show up until after ICE has been shot at, and so many other things, which is exactly what Tom Homan and other Trump administration officials have noted in response, and it's completely accurate.
When you hear that there's basically an all-points bulletin out by a street gang, the Latin Kings, on ICE agents, are we seeing this kind of war between our federal government and these cartels and street gangs boiling up, or is it too soon to kind of make a determination on that?
Oh, no, it's there. It's been there, and it's getting worse. And I said, Joey, back in March on a Fox show, I said, if the hateful rhetoric continues, especially from members of Congress, comparing ICE and Nazis and racists and the Gestapo, there's going to be bloodshed. This shooting at the Border Patrol in Chicago, just the latest shooting. We had a shooting at a Border Patrol facility in Texas a few months ago. That shooter was killed by Border Patrol. We had another guy showed up at an ICE office in Dallas, killed 2 detainees. He shot himself. Another guy showed up at a detention facility in Texas, wounded a local police officer that responded to the scene to help the ICE officers in that facility. Several aliens have been shot and killed during these operations. And the bottom line is the bloodshed is going to continue. As long as the rhetoric continues, especially from members of Congress, it emboldens the bad guy to take actions against ICE and Border Patrol agents.
Yeah, but of course, again, that's the entire point of what they're doing. They are actively resisting the deportation so hard because these are the types of people they want to keep into the country, right? That's who they're fighting for. They're fighting for Kilmar Bego Garcia. They're fighting for lunatics like this who have, prior arrests, multiple felonies, and then are committing terrorism, and then they'll get celebrated by the left wing, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they're pushing the rhetoric and the policing sanctuary city policies that they are, of course, because they also know, right, that violence will occur, and that's what the Democrat Party is pushing for. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because the record is very clear on where these people stand and how they react every single time that there's actual violence. So, all right, that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.